They said the mountain was harmless, solid as stone, older than memory. I'd lived beneath it my whole life, on the same stretch of land my grandfather had farmed before me. I knew its moods the way a man knows the breath of his own lungs. So when the rumble started, low, steady, like a pulse on the ground, I knew something was wrong. 2 months earlier, the HOA from the new development up the slope had arrived with bright smiles and clipboards. A community reservoir, they said, eco-friendly, safe. They promised it would help everyone. Water for the lawns, clean energy for the homes. They didn't ask what I thought. They just built it, pouring concrete into soil that had always moved when it rained too long. At first, I tried to ignore the uneasy tremors that rolled through the valley at night. Then I noticed cracks zigzagging across my barn wall, small but spreading. One morning, my well water turned cloudy with fine gray dust. I climbed a ridge and saw it, an enormous pool shimmering like glass, its walls too thin, the ground beneath still settling. I called the HOA board. They told me to stop spreading panic. One even laughed and said, "Don't worry, old man, the engineers know better than farmers." I hung up, staring at that glittering lake hanging above my fields like a loaded gun. I knew one truth that they didn't. When you ignore the warning of the earth always answers back. A week passed before I saw them again. The HOA board, standing in the sun like they owned the mountain. Their trucks rolled up the dirt road, tires kicking dust across my field. They said they were here for an inspection. Clipboards, hard hats, polished shoes that had never touched real soil. I asked them to come see the cracks in my barn foundation. The president of the HOA, a man named Pierce, smiled without looking at me. "You're always worried about something, aren't you?" he said. "That's what farmers do best, worry." I wanted to tell him it wasn't worry. It was instinct. The ground was shifting, breathing heavy like something trapped beneath it. Even my animals knew. The cows had stopped grazing near the creek. The dog wouldn't go up the ridge anymore. Something about the mountain's heartbeat had changed, deep and wrong. One evening, after another ignored email, I drove up the access road myself. The reservoir shimmered in the moonlight, calm, too calm. I walked closer and pressed my hand to the retaining wall. Cold, thin, I could hear the faint trickle of water where no water should have been. I recorded it on my phone, every drop echoing like a countdown. The next day, I took the evidence to the county office. They promised to look into it. But I saw the hesitation in their eyes. The HOA had money, lawyers, connections. I was just a man in mud-stained boots, one complaint in a stack of paperwork that would never see daylight. That night, lightning flashed behind the mountain. For a moment, it looked alive, like it was breathing, waiting. And deep down, I knew, when the mountain waits, it's only waiting to strike. The night it happened started like any other. Quiet, heavy, the air thick with the smell of rain. I was sitting by the window, listening to thunder roll across the valley. When the first sound reached me, it wasn't thunder. It was deeper, angrier, a growl that came from the ground itself. The dog started barking, frantic, clawing at the door. I stepped outside. The sky was split open by lightning, and for a heartbeat the mountain shone white as bone. That's when I saw it. Water spilling over the edge of the reservoir, glimmering silver in the stormlight. Then the wall gave way. It didn't break all at once. It bent, groaned, and then exploded like glass under pressure. A wave of black water tore down the slope, carrying trees, fences, and pieces of road. The sound was unbearable, like a freight train made of thunder and stone. I ran for higher ground, shouting for my dog, the mud pulling at my boots. Behind me, the flood roared through my farm, ripping apart everything I owned in seconds. The barn splintered. The tractor vanished. I barely made it to the ridge before the valley disappeared beneath a swirling sea of debris. When the sun rose, there was nothing left. The fields were gone. The creek had turned into a wasteland of mud and twisted metal. Down below, where the HOA's neat houses once stood, there was only silence. Smoke rose from broken roofs, cars half buried in silt. I walked down slowly, every step sinking into the muck. Pierce was there, standing knee-deep in what used to be his living room, staring at nothing. When he saw me, his voice cracked. We should have listened. I didn't answer. There was nothing to say. The mountain had spoken louder than either of us ever could. In the days that followed, reporters came, cameras flashing, asking how it happened. Engineers blamed faulty design. Politicians blamed the weather, but I knew the truth. It wasn't the rain or the plans or the permits. It was pride. They built a monument to control nature, and nature reminded them who was in charge. The county called it tragedy. I called it justice. Weeks later, I stood on that same ridge again, the air still carrying the faint smell of wet clay. The land was scarred but quiet, like it was healing. I rebuilt slowly, with my own hands, not to forget what happened, but to remember. Every hammer strike was a promise, to listen, to respect the earth that gives and takes in equal measure. The reservoir site had become a crater now, filled with reeds and silence. Sometimes when the wind passed through, it sounded almost like breathing again.